So here's the thing. When my school decided to convert to online classes for the rest of the semester, honestly, I was pretty okay with it because before I got to college, I was homeschooled. I really loved being homeschooled. I learned really well from that format, but it's totally understandable for people who have never been in that sort of learning environment to be kind of freaked out by this whole situation. So I wanted to make this video to share with you a few of my productivity tips that I learned over the years from being a homeschooler.
Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. Okay, back to the video. One of the hardest parts about working from home is waking up in the morning. I motivate myself to get out of bed by watching an episode of something funny on Netflix. This may seem counterproductive, but working from home is all about strategy. Think about it. Isn't it better to watch 30 minutes of TV now so you can guarantee you'll be awake to work the rest of the morning rather than risk sleeping in and not getting anything done? Alright, now that I've got my daily dose of fez, it's time to start the day. Now that I'm awake and alert, it's time for me to consult my to-do list, which I actually started making the night before I filmed this video. And the reason for that is honestly, I'm lucky to be functioning on 50% brain power when I first get up in the morning, which is really just not enough for me to thoughtfully plan out my day in a way that's an efficient use of my time. So I do this process at night, that way as soon as I'm ready in the morning, I can get started with my first task.
Hello! It is Alexa from the past, aka the night before I am filming my productivity vlog. So I want to take you through my two-step process for planning out a productive day. One of the best tips that I can give you when you're planning out your day is to schedule your work during time periods where you know you're going to be the most productive. So if you're a morning person, get up early and knock it all out as soon as the day starts. If you are not a morning person, don't feel like getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning is gonna make you more productive, because honestly, it probably won't. Try to use these kind of crazy circumstances as an opportunity to learn a little bit more about yourself, figure out what times of the day you're the most productive, and then schedule your schoolwork accordingly.
Step 1 of planning out a productive day is to write out a to-do list. I'm sure many of you are probably familiar with this concept. For me, this isn't something that has a particular order to it. This is literally a huge brain dump of every single activity I will need to complete the next day. I go through each class to think about which assignments need to be done, and I also try to break these up into individual subtasks. Not only does this make it easier to handle from a mental standpoint, but it also means that I'm more frequently checking things off of my list, which gives me the motivation to keep powering through. The next step is ordering my tasks and laying them out in Google Calendar. Sometimes when I'm writing out my to-do list, I can be a little overly optimistic about what I can actually achieve in a single day, so laying everything out graphically lets me see how many hours I have to work with and how long each task is going to take. I also give myself gaps between each task, that way if something takes a little bit longer than I thought it would, it doesn't throw off the rest of my day. Alright, time to get to work.
Okay, so for my first task of the day, I've decided to go through and proofread one of the assignments that I worked on yesterday. I just have to kind of read through it and proofread, look for like grammar and spelling errors and things like that, make sure it all makes sense. And it was an assignment that I worked on with a couple of other people, so just making sure that like all the parts are like nicely synthesized and they flow really well. So that's what I'm going to be doing for the next few minutes.
Next to physically getting out of bed, I'd say the second hardest part of working from home is just getting started. That's why I always start with my easiest task first. I guess it's kind of like tricking my brain into feeling a false sense of security, but it gives me the momentum I need to work through my harder tasks later on in the day.
For my second task for the day, I am going to be working on a report for my cell culture class, and so since that was originally a lab-based class, and obviously we can't go in person to run experiments. Basically, our professor has provided us with some simulated cell culture data. We are going to work with that data, graph it out, run statistics on it, and then go through the analysis that we would have gone through on our own data. So I will start writing up that paper today. I will kind of draw out an outline of what I want to say and start working on it.
After going through the rubric to figure out what the expectations were going to be for this report, I went ahead and wrote myself a short little outline. Almost all of our reports at this point follow a typical journal article format, so I'll have an abstract, intro, methods, results, and conclusions. Now, this next tip is actually one of my all-time favorites. It's one that my mom taught me a while ago, and that is when you're trying to write an essay, start by writing it out on paper before you type it up on the computer. Last year when I was writing my secondary essays for med school, I got to a point where I really hit a wall, and I just could not make any of my essays make sense anymore. None of my words were fitting together right, and I was super frustrated. And I was telling my mom about this, and she reminded me of this tip. And so I went and I got a little journal from Target, and I sat down and I started writing by hand, and literally like magic, the words started to flow again. So this tip really does work. I looked into this, and it turns out there's actually a lot of research to back this up. I found a few studies talking about how writing things by hand activates certain parts of the brain that typing just doesn't. Alright, now that I've finished writing for the day, it is time for lunch. I usually keep this simple. If I take more than 30 minutes or so on lunch, I run the risk of losing my motivation to get back to work in the afternoon. So I usually try to pick something like leftovers from the night before or a quick frozen meal. Alright, back to work. Circuits is another one of my classes that is primarily lab-based, and so instead of going into the lab to actually build the circuits that we're talking about, now we've switched to just reading through the protocols and answering a few questions in a lab report format. Here you can see I'm going through and drawing the circuit that we would have been building and graphing out the phase response.
Okay, so I just finished reading through the lab report and taking notes. In this experiment, we would have been building an all-pass filter. Basically, it's a filter where your input voltage and your output voltage is the same, but it does shift the phase of your input signal. But now I'm going to work through the lab report questions, and we'll see how I do. Yeah, so that was harder than I thought it was going to be. I actually ended up emailing my TA for help, so I will be waiting for that response, and hopefully we'll be able to finish this assignment tomorrow. I am not counting this as a failure though. Having to ask for help is never failure.
In situations like these where you just finished a really frustrating assignment or you weren't able to finish an assignment at all, the best thing you could possibly do is take a break.
I don't know if I'm doing this right.
For my last task of the day, I was originally going to study for a circuits quiz that I would be having the next day, but honestly, after that lab report, I didn't really want to look at any more circuits, so I decided to just do some admin tasks and answer some emails. This is my final productivity tip. Be flexible. All the planning in the world can't give you the ability to predict the future. Even though things didn't go exactly how I thought they were going to, I still had a really productive day. and I can either feel bad for the things that I didn't do, or I can feel accomplished for the things that I did do. Yay, we did it!
I hope that by the end of this video you feel encouraged and motivated to finish the rest of the semester strong. Let me know in the comments below what your productivity tips are, and if there's any way that I can be praying for you during this time. You got this!